Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Tuesday, October 7th around here, and we got a big time weekend to break down. We just had week 6 with a couple of massive upsets that we'll start with. We'll talk about Texas, we'll talk about Penn State, and how this might not get a whole lot better for those two teams, at least this season, and we'll talk about the future of James Franklin around State College. Then we'll get into Alabama and Miami getting some state wins, including a couple other teams, particularly in the Big 12, that got some massive wins that could totally inform what the rest of the season looks like. And then we'll do a little bit of a whip around to all the other games. Texas A&M looks really, really good right about now. Michigan gets a win that looked okay, didn't look all the way through, but definitely that passing game looked a whole lot better, and plenty of other stuff coming at the very end of the show. But let's go ahead and jump into this, and let's start with the two biggest stories of the weekend. Weirdly enough, neither of the two ranked games are a part of the biggest stories of the weekend, but Texas and Penn State both fall this last weekend, and two very different stories in some respects, but a lot of the same thing. You know, the number 1 and the number 2 teams in the country officially unranked going into this upcoming weekend, but going into this past weekend, they were fully ranked. Texas was number 9 in the country, and they fall to Florida 29-21. This one is sort of kind of a warm-up for Penn State in some respects. This one is bad in a lot of different ways for Texas, and we'll get into that here in a second. I want to talk about Florida first, but for Penn State, it might be a little bit worse, and we'll talk about that here in a second, of course. But let's start with Florida. They won the football game. They deserve all the respect in the world because this was about Texas being bad, but Florida looked the part. For the first time this year, it looked like a team that had a quarterback that was fully prepared, which I don't think is an accident because this last 2 weeks might have been the first full 2 weeks that DJ Lagway's been able to practice all the way through in his entire career, and that's not even a joke. He has not been able to practice for a long time and actually got dinged up in this game, so we'll talk about that when we get into the Texas A&M game for Florida coming up. But at the end of the day, it looked like a team that was playing together. Napier finally leaned into who is his best player on the football team, which is Jaden Ball, and then you add in a guy like Dallas Wilson, the star freshman that everyone around Gainesville knew was going to be special, but I think a lot of people around the country didn't fully know the name. Now you know the name. Went for 111 yards, 2 touchdowns, and kind of dragged a couple of Texas players into the end zone for the second one there. But an incredible player. One of those guys that totally changes the complexion of that offense that in a lot of ways was lacking that guy. Was lacking the guy that you could just say, oh, he's in single coverage, we're going to throw in that direction, he's probably going to make a play. Now you have Vernell Brown Jr. playing at a really high level, Dallas Wilson back into the mix, Eugene Wilson still a player on this football team that will make plays for you. This is an offense that can put it together. Now, there's a big-time question mark there, which is Billy Napier has been a guy that has gotten up for a big-time matchup and then kind of faded away for in some matchups. He has to find a way to keep this going week through week. I think you have to find a way to keep DJ Lagway healthy, and we can talk about the Billy Napier situation here for a second because it is a conversation to be had. You know, a lot of people talking about how he's officially saved his job or he's on his way to saving his job. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, first of all. If they play that level of football the rest of the year, if that's the Florida that we're getting, especially or on both sides of the ball, really, but on the line of scrimmage especially, I feel pretty confident they're going to win about 7 or 8 games and he's going to keep his job. I do feel confident in that. That is no given by any respect. I don't know what DJ Lagway is going to look like this upcoming weekend. I don't know what the Florida offense is going to look like. I don't know if that's the team that we're getting going forward. I don't know if that was a product of them just feeling really good coming off a bye week, if that was a product of Texas not executing at a high level. Whatever that is, we'll find out over the next couple of weeks. He is not safe by any respect. I can promise you that, at least not as of right now. One other thing that I can tell you is if Napier's out the door, so is DJ Lagway, so is Jaden Ball, so is Vernell Brown, so is Dallas Wilson. So you probably got to think about it just a little bit longer. Now, it's not to say that you should keep him just to keep those players in the building. That's always a ridiculous way to go about leading a football program. But that being said, there is a conversation to be had here. And if that's the Florida that you're getting going forward, I can almost promise you Billy Napier is going to keep that job. Now, I can't promise that's the Florida you're going to get going forward. That's been the Achilles heel of his time there, and definitely something he's going to have to deal with going forward. But if they play that level of football, they can win in a College Station this upcoming weekend. They can win a lot of the big-time games they have coming forward, and then Billy Napier sitting at the end of the year still surviving somehow. I had totally buried this guy multiple different times in the past, but he keeps coming to life, and this team fights. That's one thing that you cannot argue about Billy Napier's time there is every single week this team fights for that head coach. So They obviously care about him. They obviously want him to be around and want him to succeed. This might be a little bit tougher a decision than Florida wants to make. But at the end of the day, some people think it delayed the inevitable. Some people think they're going to find their way to 8-4 and he's going to totally save everything. I don't know. It's totally up in the air, and frankly, we won't really know until they take the field against Texas A&M and we see what that looks like. So Florida got the performance that they're absolutely capable of. They are capable of playing that level of football and competing with good teams. Now, we'll talk about Texas here in a second. That was bad from them in a number of ways, but at the end of the day, they get a big-time win there, one that they absolutely needed, and Billy Napier, let's say, extends his stay for a little bit longer around Gainesville. We'll see what happens this weekend and how that informs the decision, because very well he could be fired by the time we're talking next week, or he could be rolling again with another big-time win. It's all up in the air for Florida. As for Texas, that was really gross in a number of different ways. And the lines of scrimmage is where a lot of people are focusing. That's where I'm going to focus too. That offensive line's a problem, and it's not going to get a ton better. Now, it could get marginally better. These are still young players that are going to get a little bit better. I think Brandon Baker is going to play better football. I tend to believe a lot of those players are going to be better players going down the road. The problem is it's not going to get a ton better. It's never going to be a strength for this football team. They're going to have to play around it, and that is a massive problem, especially for a Steve Sarkisian offense that wants everything to be long developing, deep crossers and comebacks and everything that takes a little bit of time, and you need pass pro guys to handle it. They're not going to be able to do that this year. They're going to have to find a way to get around teams, to spread them out just a little bit more. Everyone wants to commit to this, max protect because we have to give more bodies. It's not helping. They're getting home with 4 guys regardless of if you're protecting with 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. It doesn't make a difference. Spread the guys out. Use the talent that you have on the edges to try to get this offense off the ground, because it can't just be Arch Manning gets hit and absolutely ripped one play, then he steps out and makes a nice play downfield, and then he throws a pick the next play. You're not giving this kid a shot. And it's not to say that Arch Manning doesn't deserve blame for this game. He had the 2 picks. They were not good at all by any means, and he absolutely needs to get better. He also had 300 of Texas' 340 yards. He was the leading rusher in this game. He got pressured 35 times on 29 passes. He got 11 rushing yards from his running backs in general. It's not good enough. And as a guy making his second road start, his 7th start as a whole, and I get it. He's an easy guy to blame. He's got Manning on the back of his jersey. He's supposed to be better than this. I'm not arguing that. What I am arguing is, if you find a quarterback in the country that can succeed under those circumstances in that environment, please let me know, because he's worth a whole lot of money to just about everyone in the country. He's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, and I can't find that guy in the country. Maybe Garrett Nussmeier, maybe. But as of right now, he is injured, and I don't think he would be able to succeed all that well against this Florida defense, and he didn't when he played them. So at the end of the day, I get it. There's a lot of energy to be pushed towards Arch Manning, and he deserves plenty of that energy. I'm not arguing that by any means. I'm arguing that if you took the Arch Manning out of it, and that's something we can't do, I totally get that. If Texas had an offensive line that could block for this kid, if the wide receivers and the running backs were making people miss instead of going down at the first contact, if Steve Sarkisian was giving him answers early in this game instead of saying, you're going to have to find a way to run for your life and then make a play downfield, you have an issue going forward. If you can't get that figured out, if you keep putting Arch Manning in spots that he is not comfortable yet because he's not a seasoned quarterback. I get he's supposed to be a little bit smarter than this. At the end of the day, he's not all the way there yet, and you're leaving him out to dry in a lot of ways. So you're making what are genuine problems look a whole lot worse than they actually are, because this offensive line's not helping, because the wide receivers aren't helping them, and frankly, on Saturday, the coaches weren't helping them too much either. So a lot of stuff to figure out for this Texas offense. No two ways about it. For the Texas defense, you got to play better. Somehow you got pushed around by a team that has plenty of dudes up front. It's not to say that Florida shouldn't push teams around. It's just to say you shouldn't be one of those teams. You should be physical enough at the University of Texas. That should never be a problem. It shouldn't be a problem on the offensive line or the defensive line that you have big physical bodies that are not afraid of contact. As of right now, you got bodied because a lot of guys were trying to play a little bit finesse in that football game. You have to find ways to be a little bit more physical, to be a little bit more effort-based in the way that you block, in the way that you attack blocks on the defensive side of the ball, and you got to find a way to get some offense out of this kid. You got to find a way to get the ball out of his hands quicker, because DJ Lagway had the quickest quickest snap to throw time in the entire country this past weekend because they knew that what they were looking at with the Texas pass rush. For the Texas team, everything was long developing, and you saw what happened. Arch Manning got absolutely ripped, and if you walk that offensive line with that level of effort and that level of gameplay into the Oklahoma game, Arch Manning's probably not leaving it. At least not healthy. I'll just be totally honest with you. It is going to be a very, very tough game this weekend if you can't figure out a lot of things. I've said it before. I said it on Twitter. This is going to be one of the most important weeks in the Steve Sarkisian era at Texas, because if you find a way to win that game this upcoming weekend, everything's back on track. You're 4-2 going into a Kentucky game that you feel really confident about. You lose, you're 3-3, and people are asking questions about what the future of that program is, especially with the quarterback that you have. So a lot of stuff to figure out for Texas. For Florida, all the respect in the world. They did an incredible job. We'll talk about Billy Napier more down the road, and we'll see if he can continue to try to save his job. But as of right now, Texas got a lot of things to figure out, and it doesn't look like it's going to get a whole lot better. It looks like 8 wins might be awesome for this Texas team at this point. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, a lot more time to go, and a big one this weekend that could turn a lot of things around. Then you got this one, and this one's a little bit worse. Somehow, it's a little bit worse. And it's not to say that Penn State played a ton worse than Texas did, or Penn State is a ton worse than Texas is, because I don't think they are. It's because you know what you have. It's because a lot of guys on this football team and a lot of starters on this football team forgoed the NFL draft to come back. It's because you have a quarterback that has played 3 years. You have running backs that have played for a long time. You have an offensive line that's very experienced. You have pass catchers that, while new to the program, are experienced players. You pretty much know who you are. And that's a really, really frustrating thing for Penn State fans. Now, obviously, you can play better football. I expect you to play better football going forward. And I think you're going to get to 8 wins regardless, if I'm being totally honest, because of the schedule that you're going to go up against. And that's something we can talk about moving forward with Penn State. But at the end of the day, this is kind of the team that you have. This is definitely the coaching staff that you have. And that's something you got to figure out. And there's one common denominator, and we will talk about James Franklin plenty at the end of this thing. But again, let's start with the UCLA because they won the day. And what a day for Nico Iamaleava. I get it. A lot of talk in the offseason. I took part in plenty of the talk in the offseason. I think he made a little bit of a mistake leaving Tennessee in some respects. That kid's playing really good football. And he's playing confident. He's playing on time. He's playing the way that a lot of people have been waiting on him to play. Now, a lot of that's with his legs. You still want to see more in the pass game, of course. But when he goes 166, 2 touchdowns passing, 128 rushing, and 3 touchdowns, he's doing everything you're asking of him. He even called plays at certain points in this game. And that's who we got to talk about maybe most readily is Jerry Neuheisel. He's the headline here. I do want to give some love to Tim Skipper. At the end of the day, he is the head coach. He was the special assistant to Deshaun Foster before Deshaun was fired. He wanted him to succeed. I can absolutely promise you that. He did everything in his power to make sure the Deshaun Foster era was the moment that turned UCLA around. It wasn't working by any means. And able to rally the troops after getting, not joking by any means, absolutely manhandled by New Mexico and dominated by UNLV earlier in the season, you find a way to put together this performance. The defense is not great, and it's not going to be great. Let's just be totally honest. But at the end of the day, you are getting everything out of a quarterback that is uniquely talented. One way or the other. He wasn't playing his best football. He's finally playing free. He finally looks like he's not thinking about it. He's just ripping the ball out there. Obviously, some things to go on the offensive side of the ball, particularly passing for him. But at the end of the day, when this kid is playing confident, you're going to find very few more talented, just outright talented quarterbacks in the entire country, and he showed it on Saturday. It was really, really awesome to watch. Jerry Neuheisel, let's just talk about it here for a second, had essentially 2 days to put everything together, started on Wednesday, entered new plays, put together new systems, and found a way to put together an offensive plan that worked, and it was a masterpiece from start to finish. I don't know how he didn't know how to call plays, but at the end of the day, it's a very, very new thing for him. Didn't call a play on a 4th and 1 that they got stopped on, missed a couple of ones, definitely needs to get a little bit better at that, but we'll have a little bit of time to put it together now that they've gotten this win. Incredible. And I said it on Twitter afterwards. There's a lot of things that UCLA can do going forward. There's a lot of things that they will do at the end of the season, both with the portal and their head coach and the alignment of the university, maybe even the athletic department and the athletic director. That's a totally different conversation. Whatever you do, I don't care who the next head coach is. It probably won't be Jerry Neuheisel, with all due respect. it has to involve him. One way or another, Jerry Neuheisel has to be involved in whatever the future is for UCLA football. Every team has their guy. Every team has the guy that loves that program more than anyone else in the entire world. Jerry Neuheisel is that for UCLA. My guy Liam Blutman might be a very, very close second, but at the end of the day, he needs to be a part of what you're doing going forward. Period. End of story. Stanford has this with Andrew Luck, and although it's a little bit dark right now, I feel confident that Andrew Luck's going to find a way to do it because he loves Stanford, and he wants that program to be talented. He wants that program to be good. That's what Jerry Neuheisel wants. No matter what you do going forward, no matter who you hire, no matter which way you go, no matter what the future looks like for UCLA football, Jerry Neuheisel has to be in the building because he gives you an edge. He gives you something that not every program has, and that is a guy that fully understands what this fan base wants, and he's understood his entire life. This is him. He is UCLA, and he needs to be a part of this. A huge amount of respect to the UCLA players. All the energy last week, or a lot of it at the very least, was going to fired head coaches and the teams that were going to lose players. And some guys that were medically redshirting, some guys that were just leaving programs, going into the portal. That happened all over the place this past week. Didn't really happen at UCLA. I'm sure it happened here and there. Didn't really see any major stories, but at the end of the day, they found a way to get to come together to put this thing together after a week of playing a UC or a Northwestern team that you probably felt like you could have beat, and you fall short. You find a way to come back home and you pull off probably the craziest P4 upset that I've ever seen. Maybe not the craziest upset. Now it's pretty darn close if I'm being totally honest. If you watch this UCLA team through the first 4 weeks, I wouldn't have bet on them to beat anyone, truthfully anyone in the entire country, if I'm being totally honest. But at the end of the day, they find a way to beat Penn State. They find a way to get it done, and it's an incredible win. It's an incredible moment for this program. I don't know what the rest of the season looks like. I don't know what the future looks like for UCLA. I know that they have a path forward, and for a long time, it really didn't look like that. So, huge amount of credit to Deshaun Foster, huge amount of credit to Tim Skipper, huge amount of credit Tim Skipper, to Jerry Neuheisel, to Nico Imaliava, to all of the players on this team, because that is not an easy thing to do. Now it's Penn State's turn, and when I was doing the preview for this game, I said Penn State has a vacation to LA coming up. I was not being serious, and I don't think they knew that because they treated this like a vacation, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They did not take this game as seriously as they should have. I get it. It's not a good football team, or at least it wasn't going into Saturday. At the end of the day, they got a talented quarterback, and they had some talent on the outsides. Penn State wasn't prepared for any of it. And from start to finish, they got outcoached, they got outschemed, they got outmanned by a team that they shouldn't have any of that happen to them against. So, a lot of things to figure out. The problem is Drew Allar was really good in this game. It's not the same problems. It's not you're just looking at the same thing week over week. The defense is just not very good. The defense is just a little bit slow. They're not in the right position. Frankly, they're not calling a great game as Jim Knowles and that defensive staff. And that's a whole other problem because he paid him $3 million to come over from your rival. But at the end of the day, you have a lot of things to figure out if you're Penn State. And I don't think you have the youth that Texas has to fall back on. Now, it's not necessarily a great thing to fall back on if you're Texas. It doesn't make you better right now, but at the very least makes you feel better about the future. I don't know what you feel if you're a Penn State fan right now. I really don't, because at the end of the day, what Penn State was for so long under James Franklin was they're not going to beat Ohio State, they're not going to beat Michigan. They're going to be a really good football team, and they're not going to fall in these games that every other team finds a way to fall in. They're going to play the game the way that they're supposed to every single week. Yeah, they'll fall short against the elite teams, but it's never going to happen against one of these teams. Well, it's happened against one of these teams, and you have to find a way to salvage this, and I don't know what that looks like. If I'm being totally honest, I think the schedule sets up nicely where you can get to 8 wins and you can find a way to feel okay about what happened this season, but at the end of the day, I don't think you're walking into 2026 feeling great about James Franklin if you're walking in with him at all. That's the big time question around State College right now. I think a lot of people want him gone. I think a lot of people realize that $56 million in a buyout is not ideal at this very moment for Penn State when you're trying to keep up with Oregon and Ohio State and Michigan and all those other teams in the Big Ten. So I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. I don't know what's going to happen going forward with that game. It was weird how this one unfolded because when they block the punt, when they get within 6, you're thinking, okay, they've officially buckled in, and then they let UCLA march back down the field. And then Penn State's able to get back within 6, maybe have a little bit of momentum, and then UCLA marches right back down the field and scores a touchdown. So it was bad. And I really don't know what the path forward is. I don't know what the future looks like this year or going forward. I tend to believe that the James Franklin experience is going to come to an end at some point here pretty soon. And I don't know how much of that is on James Franklin, how much of that is on the rest of the team, how much of that is on the athletic department at Penn State. All of that's up in the air. What I do know is a lot was sunk into this football team. A lot of guys coming back from the NFL, a lot of new coordinators coming in, one in particular that not exactly working out the way you want them to. A lot was put into this football team, and you can't go 7-5. You maybe can go 8-4 and try to find a way to come back next season, but you've lost this fan base, at least for the time being, and we'll see what happens going forward. It is going to be tough to watch what happens here going forward, and we'll see if Penn State makes the tough decision to move on. We'll see if they stick with the guy. I don't know how much better you're getting with somebody new other than James Franklin, at least in the short term. Maybe in the long term you can get better. So we'll see what happens going forward with Penn State. It is a totally up in the air situation. I think it's a little bit worse than the Texas situation in some ways, just because you have that veteran leadership, you have that veteran identity of this football team, whereas Texas is a little bit younger, and you have to assume they're going to get a little bit better throughout the year. But at the end of the day, that schedule sets up to where James Franklin might be able to keep his job without actually coaching better football, and that is a frustrating thing for a lot of Penn State fans. For UCLA, they get Michigan State this upcoming weekend. Michigan State gave up 40 to Boston College, so let's see what happens with this UCLA team going forward. It could fall on its face the rest of the way, and they go 1-11. They could find a little bit of a groove here and go and be able to win 3 or 4 games, and then we're talking about them as one of the weirder but more interesting stories the rest of the way. But overall, Penn State and Texas left something on the table on Saturday, and they're going to leave a lot on the table this season. I think it's really hard for me to look forward and say Texas is going to be able to find a way to make the playoff after this, or Penn State's going to be able to find a way to go beat Ohio State. I don't think either of those things are going to happen. I think if you're going to get that offensive line play from Texas, you're probably looking at a 7-5 team. I tend to believe Sark is going to be much better prepared this upcoming Saturday, but I don't know if that's going to matter against the defense that is going to be that good on the other side with Oklahoma. So a lot of things to figure out for Texas. For Penn State, I think there's a lot of future things to figure out. For Texas, you're not quite there yet, but for Penn State, I think there's a lot of contemplating about what James Franklin's going to look like going forward, if he's going to be the coach going forward. So a lot of things to figure out. We will talk about it all as it unfolds. Of course, we'll talk about their games this upcoming week, and particularly Texas, where you can get back on track. You just got to play a whole lot better than you did this Saturday. Not a whole lot of reason to think you will. But at the end of the day, we'll talk about that as it comes up. Let's take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Miami, Alabama, and a couple other teams that had some big-time statement wins this past weekend and put themselves in great positions for the CFP going forward. We'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.